The expansion of euthanasia laws in Canada has many Canadians worried because it seems that our government is offering death to people who we should be helping as a society. Recent news reports show that the vulnerable Canadians who have turned to assisted suicide are often doing so because of the poverty they experience due to disability rather than the pain they experience due to disability. And it's tough stuff. It's really challenging to think about that there are people who the government could be doing more for, who would want to live, but are choosing to die because they're not getting the support that they deserve. The expansion of assisted suicide seems to only be continuing despite these difficult news reports. The Quebec College of Physicians is currently embroiled in controversy because they've been advocating for assisted suicide for children as young as 1 year old. I'm just going to repeat that because of how tough that is to hear. Expanding assisted suicide to children as young as 1 year old. Dr. Louis Roy testified before a special joint committee on medical assistance in dying for the House of Commons. And in his comments, he said it would be appropriate for 1-year-olds to be euthanized if they had severe enough malformations or syndromes. Naturally, any Canadian observing this is going to feel uncomfortable, but it's especially troubling when you factor in what has been going on the research side of assisted suicide. For years now, there has been an effort to make an economic case for euthanasia. Rupa Subramanya has done some reporting on this. Back in 2020, the Office of the Parliamentary Budget Officer speculated that it might save the Canadian government $66 million in healthcare expenses if more people could choose suicide. Research just a few years prior to that from the universities of Manitoba and Calgary showed that the Canadian government could save upwards of $100 million annually on healthcare expenses if more people chose suicide. So this economic case for euthanasia is troubling because it makes you wonder, why are we doing this? Is it about compassion or is it about saving money? Why are these laws changing and spreading so quickly? Why does it seem that there's not a meaningful national conversation about this, and instead it's happening under the noses of most Canadians who don't realize how quickly the laws are changing? Now, I think at minimum, as we try to figure this one out as a country, because I recognize this is complicated stuff, we need to have a conversation. And in the meantime, I think the least we could ask for is the strengthening of conscience rights so that healthcare workers who have objections to what's happening are able to object and not lose their jobs. If you're a doctor, if you're a nurse, if you're a healthcare professional who's uncomfortable with referring people to assisted suicide, uncomfortable with talking about children being euthanized, I think you should have the right to say, no, I don't want to be part of this. And yet, expanding conscience rights is a far more difficult battle than expanding assisted suicide. A private member's bill was brought forward to Parliament last week to expand conscience rights for healthcare workers. And it got no support from 4 parties. Not a single Liberal, not a single NDP, not a single Green Party member, not a single Bloc Québécois member voted in favor of expanding conscience rights. The only party that did was the Conservative Party. And even then, there were a handful of Conservative MPs who refused to vote. So the Conservatives couldn't even get unanimous support for this either. Which leaves us with the primary issue at hand. What does human dignity and protection for the vulnerable actually look like in Canada during our time for our generation?